the whole prospect of doing what is called a lecture has been a source of embarrassment to me. I've shuddered about the thought of it for some weeks now, and I didn't know what, and I still don't know what to offer myself by way of contributing to this lecture. I find, for instance, that I talk about myself, that my talks about myself come out as a perfectly absurd series of rather silly anecdotes. Because no matter what you're involved with, you end up doing embarrassing things and silly things. And not the films, not the work that one does, but that's the way it comes out. And when you ask me questions about myself, it usually comes out now, since I'm a very traveled man, it comes out as some strange, weird, rather boring traveler's story. So you'll notice that if I have any opportunity to speak, it'll come out as a rather silly traveler's story. To start off in this vein, I just came back the day before yesterday from California. And my times in California nowadays are always very frustrating because I go there to see my children who live there. On this occasion, being a master of mistiming, I arrived when my daughter was just about to leave for Europe, which she did 2 days later, and my son was staying with his mother in New York until 2 days before I left. So I stayed there for 2 weeks, biting my nails and feeling antagonistic, as I usually do, about the place where I found myself. So I thought, the thought of this lecture hit me every so often, and I wondered what I was going to say. So I thought, well, now, the easiest thing to do is to release my antagonism about Hollywood. And then I thought, no, I think that's not fair. I shan't do that. I should do the rather more challenging thing of trying to find some good news from Hollywood. How about that, I said to myself. That's going to be really difficult. So I sat down to lunch in the patio of the Beverly Hills Hotel, which is rather nice, quite nice. And I sat there, and as I waited for my friend to turn up, I started preparing a list of good news. And I asked this friend who turned up, what's your first piece of good news? And he paused and he said, well, Creedence Clearwater have made $30 million. And therefore they can cock a snoot, but that wasn't the expression he used, at Hollywood producers who want to make films with them. So I noted that down. And then he went on to tell me that the Russ Meyer film that had been made at 20th Century Fox called The Valley of the Dolls was a complete failure. And this he regarded as a piece of good news. And then when further asked about the scene at 20th Century, he said, yes, indeed, Myra Breckenridge also. And about this time I noticed that a butterfly, an unusually pretty butterfly, was flying through the patio of the Beverly Hills Hotel. That I thought was remarkable, because Beverly Hills and Hollywood and Los Angeles strikes me always as the most highly polluted place in the world, and how human beings can hardly flit from place to place. So to find a butterfly doing so was worth noting. And then I found out that rodeos were doing very well this season, and therefore it was very good for Lorne Green and others. And then we got to hear about cassette manufacturing, how this was going to change the face of showbiz in America, and cable TV, right. And then I met my friend Andy Stone. He joined us, movie director. And he said things were great, because he's always had a lot of trouble with unions in the past, because he works entirely on live locations. And he surprised me once by having made these live location films in America quite successfully, but always getting into a little trouble with the unions. He finally told me one day that he was coming to England. He said, because these Hollywood unions are becoming unbearable. The implication being that they would be less unbearable in England, which seems surprising. But nevertheless, he had good news. He said that the unions were now quite easy to get on with, because on account of the general unemployment, they would charge less money and they would do more work, and the extras would only charge about $5 a day, and things were great. And then I learned that finally that Steve Allen's gag man had a very good job with Spiro Agnew. And so I thought I'd pass these things on to you. And coming back to England, I thought I might do the same turn for myself and find out what was good here. I know that this has nothing to do with delivering a lecture, but I thought that while I was here, I might pick up some good news, because up to the moment when I went away to California, there'd only been one piece of good news in England this year in my book, and that was that Huddersfield Town had been elevated to the first division. But of course I worry always about films, and I have a sort of growing feeling that things are not quite the way they should be with British film industry. I recalled a conversation, Traveller's Tale coming up, when I was in Hong Kong not too long ago, and I was at a dinner party. I was in fact the guest of honor at the Society of Yorkshiremen's annual ball. They have a society. And I was not really looking forward to this very much, because although I love Yorkshiremen, nevertheless I didn't really like the English people in Hong Kong very much. I thought they were terribly snotty, and I thought, oh God, another evening of them. That would be awful. While at the same time I adored the Chinese people that I encountered. Now, on this evening, I found that the English people, being Yorkshiremen, were absolutely adorable, and I was completely reassured about Yorkshiremen. But on the other hand, the only person that I completely detested in the whole group was a Chinese gentleman who happened to get in there. He leaned over my table after dinner, and his opening remark was, "How is it, Mr. Mason, that films from England were so good at one time, and now they're no good?" And this is a pretty hard question to answer. I was immediately offended, and I said, "Well, perhaps you haven't seen all of our best films lately." And he said, "Well, not many." And I said, "Well, that's it, you see. You should go around and see more films. And there have been lots of films this last year." Now I was groping to think of what the good films were that he had been missing. And on the tip of my tongue, the only film that I'd seen just previous to that was If. And I thought, no, this is ridiculous. I mustn't make a fool of myself and start pleading for If. If was a great film, a lovely film, but to have a conversation, an argument with this Chinese gentleman about how happy he would have been if he'd seen If seemed somehow absurd. And but since that moment, I think that moment started it, by asking myself, what has happened to British films? And are there, in fact, any British films, or have we come to the end of the road? Is this, in fact, a eulogy that I'm delivering and not a lecture at all? And I think that's where I'll leave it, really, because it's a question that I will pursue, perhaps not this evening, but during my time here, I shall ask all my friends what's the good news from England, particularly in the British film industry.
Do you think we're being too snobbish about our films? That we should have Mr. Hitchcock or his ilk back here making those marvelous thrillers that he made, suspense films, that ilk of film?
Yeah, I think
as our bread and butter, good films.
Yes, but unfortunately the old hands no longer do it. Like Hitchcock himself, you see, he's kind of eased up on his output, and Carol Reed, you see, used to be a man who was very good at that sort of thing in the good old days. But although he's done very nicely recently with Oliver and all that, nevertheless I would like to see him also turn his hand to that class of work. And the younger directors don't seem to do it so much, do they?
I'd like to turn the questions over to our audience now.
I see that you haven't worked with the same director for more than a few times. Can you tell me, please, on your part, whether this is by accident or design?
Well, you won't get as cute an answer as you hoped for. But it's purely by accident. The only director that I've worked with twice is Carol Reed, Andy Stone, Max Ophuls, right. But there are many of them that I would certainly have liked to have worked with again, but it just didn't fall out that way.
Has the Method School of Acting appealed to you personally? Do you think it will survive?
I think the Method School of Acting is fine, Gary, except that it's not the whole story. And there's a cult in the United States particularly who regard and this is encouraged by the leader of the cult, Lee Strasberg, to regard this as the be-all and end-all of acting. And consequently, you find that a lot of actors in America who think that they're privileged people who know more about acting and who don't really have to reach out any further than their immediate grasp because they have it all. They know because they have studied and they have done all their little exercises at the method school, and that's it. I think it's fine, but it doesn't go far enough.
Mr. Mason, as an actor, were you more enthusiastic to play the great roles in The Seagull and Julius Caesar as Brutus, which filmically could be made imaginative, or more enthusiastic to play more film-scripted roles, such as Man Between and Odd Man Out?
I think that probably I'm more enthusiastic about the more film-scripted ones, really, because one of the reasons why I've always leaned towards films rather than stage plays is because I'm more interested, I respond more to the idea of visual drama rather than to spoken drama. And so I think that sometimes Shakespearean plays can be done magically. I know one or two subjects that could be just beautiful, some that haven't been done yet. But nevertheless, there is a lot of talk in Shakespeare as a rule, which is a liability. And I was not, I should mention at this point that many of these films, some of the more important ones, I wasn't necessarily very pleased with myself, particularly my own performances. I was very saddened, for instance, when I saw Julius Caesar. I wasn't too crazy about it as a film, and I was very, very dissatisfied with myself. So much so that I immediately...
Best performance you ever gave.
Oh, thank you, love.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mason, you've played in films based on novels by Flaubert, George Eliot and Joseph Conrad. Are there any other characters in classical fiction you feel you'd like to create?
Not offhand, no. I can't think of any right now. I mean, there's nobody none that I'm very, very keen.
Perhaps somebody in Graham Greene?
No. I like to find something that's really good and fresh, really, you know. I really prefer things that are created for the screen, or at any rate out of a very current novel rather than out of classic.
No lady's going to ask us any questions here. Please.
Mr. Mason, can you tell us what you think about film festivals, how important they are, and if they're of any value?
I think that film festivals are great. They're like any sort of marketing conventions. And among film festivals, you must include, at least I choose to include, the whole business of the Academy Awards in California, because that was conceived as a terrific and very successful public relations gimmick, and has been approved of as such throughout the ages. So much so that people even believe that it has some validity. That sounds like sour grapes. No, truly it has been the most wonderful public relations thing, and it has attracted a great deal of business to all the films that have been nominated, and all the actors have been nominated and given awards, and it's just marvelous. And the same applies to film festivals, where not only do you find all the movie pushers all gathered in one place, which I find interesting, but also a lot of films that normally I wouldn't get a chance to see, all being shown in one place. I think they're gorgeous.
Yes.
In 1961 or 62, they put on both performances of A Star is Born. When you did the second performance, did Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer tell you it was a completely different set of circumstances, or did young people remember that, or the old people, I beg your pardon, remember Frederick Marsh's performance and remind you that Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer of the other A Star is Born?
I don't know who made... Was it MGM who made the original film? Selznick United Artists, was it? And I don't know what the circumstances were. I know that sometimes when they make remakes of films, they have to buy up all the copies and destroy them and all that. But I don't think they did that in this case. Did they? No, I don't
No, they
think
both
so.
exist.
Anyhow, I thought, I don't know how many people knew about the existence of the old film when we made ours. But I thought the old film was much better, in my memory at any rate. I didn't see it from the day when it was first released. When it first came out, I thought this was just a wonderful film, and a beautifully balanced film, lovely film, beautiful performances and everything. And I thought that our film, although it contained some beautiful work, nevertheless was an unbalanced film and not quite as artistically true as the original film.
Mr. Mason, do you find it easier to act in a film that has been a play, or are you inhibited by that?
I'm trying to think of some that have been plays. Right?
Spring and port wine.
Oh. And well, if that's the only example that we can think of, I didn't find it particularly inhibiting. I thought it was all right.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, that's right. I do think it's a bit truly it is easier when the thing is conceived as a film, because you use silence, you use reality, you use the silences of communication you use much more freely in something that is written directly for the screen than something that has been written for the stage.
Mr. Mason, can you tell us what became of your plans to film Jane Eyre? I believe that this was something that you wanted to do for some time.
Well, I was struck on doing Jane Eyre for a long, long time. I mean, for about 12 years, really, since the first moment when I had a particular approach to Jane Eyre that I wanted to turn into a film. And during all those 12 years, not solidly all the time, but every so often, if I talked about it to somebody would encourage me, and I would go through a euphoric period, and I would think that somebody was going to come up with money to make the film and so forth. But we never actually got enough money to make the film. Last year, in one of my down moments, I thought, aha, I think I know what I shall do. I and David Cohen, who helped me with the latest script, or he wrote it and I helped him, I should say, with the latest script, I thought we'd turn it into a play version and try and get it put on like at the Dublin Theatre Festival or someplace like that, which would be not only a tryout for ourselves, but would also perhaps attract interest so that we could get some backing that way. However, later in the year, the whole thing was killed practically forever and completely because NBC started making a program of English classics for American television. And these so-called these classics were to be available for showing on theatre screens throughout the rest of the world. And the quality of these productions you may assess from the sample that was shown here a few months ago, which was David Copperfield. And I'm afraid that the same team were allowed to go ahead on Jane Eyre. So I haven't got any immediate plans, I'm afraid.
I'm going to ask a question now, and I'm surprised no one has asked it, and that's the dirty movie. I'd like to know what you think about pornography. I'd like to know why. In a way, I think you're known as the sort of dirty old man of films. You've been with a lot of very attractive, lovely young girls. You've had Helen Sharon in Age of Consent. Excuse the way I phrase that. Sue Lyons, Lolita.
Montero.
Lynn is Georgie. Who else?
Rosendo Montero.
Yes. I don't know about that one, so I can't Tell us about what you think about the way films are going in exploitation of skin and so on.
I think that the times called for a change in the standards of censorship, which is just something which emerged out of the thinking and the writing and the development of the times, and of course the movies were affected by this. And as soon as there was a loosening of the codes, then of course the producers took advantage of it and thought that they would have great audiences if they went in for skin flicks, as the cheap ones are called, or superior artistic films about sex, which the more aspiring ones would be called. But now, as I say, that people have had to sit through acres and acres of skin, I think that now we may relax and be assured that we can tell adult stories, as they're called, on the film without illustrating them in detail.
Do you think, in a sense, the permissive society has kind of permissed, two syllables of itself out of business, and that now something very valid might happen because people have gotten fed up with what's been happening? Both in theater and film, there haven't been too many great plays lately and great directors. Do you think that if people get fed up enough with, all the skin and all the sort of not saying very much, that more might suddenly happen?
Well, I hope so, certainly, because it's happened already in the United States. As I keep saying, they're into a very good groove now, and they keep making lots of excellent films which are, in fact, an illustration of current life behaviors and patterns. I don't see enough of those films being attempted in England, of stories that emerge strictly from the problems and behavior patterns of this day that we're passing through. They have been touched on slightly, but mostly with emphasis on sex and these elements that we were referring to. But no really deep digging or exploration of the kind of lives that we're living today and the kind of problems we have to face. And I think that it would be very nice if we could make some sensible films in the same way as the Americans are.
Contemporary.
Yes.
We've been digging into Lawrence and people like that.
Well, I don't see that you need to dig into Lawrence, for heaven's sake. I think it's a pity that there isn't somebody who can find or create scripts which have as much to say about the contemporary scene as Lawrence had to say, in his way, about a scene which, in fact, is not contemporary.
Mr. Mason, I think The Pumpkin Eater was one of your best performances. I'd like to know what criteria you have for accepting parts like that, and also how important the director is. Because recently, with all due respect, you've made films with rather routine directors, and people have said they turned out to be rather routine films. Was this expected on your part?
Who are these silly asses who say this? No, I choose them mostly on the value of the script, obviously, because that's the most important thing, as Sylvio would agree with me. And secondly, I try to avoid working on films in which there's a director implied who I know to be a bad director. I haven't had a lot of conflict with directors, because most of the people who get a job directing, particularly in these hard days, have proved their worth somewhere or another. And then, of course, the part has something to do with it. Sometimes I will accept something which is patently an indifferent and undistinguished story with an undistinguished director, but so long as it's a part that I feel that I can play with honesty, then I will accept it if times are hard.
Would either of you, due to the crises in the today, consider working in a film on a percentage basis?
We all do.
We do anyway.
I mean, there's certain people connected with the industry. Wasn't John Terry quoted the other day as having said, those stars ought to cut their salaries? He was.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, John Terry, you must learn your facts, boy, because most of the stars are prepared to do that and have done that on many, many occasions, and I have done it on many occasions.
But there are people now who are doing it completely, just on that basis.
Would you like to mention names?
I really would rather not, but...
Well, I can't understand, because presumably people are in this business to earn a living. And if you say that they...
Well, I'm living in Rome, you see, and...
Well, even so, I mean, you've got to earn a living, haven't you, Dux? I mean, that's what we're here for. And I like to keep things going. And many of us who get to my age have a lot of heavy responsibilities financially, and we can't work for nothing.
Yes, yes. I assumed that you would answer that way, Mr.
I'm not going to pursue that.
One of my own favourite performances of yours was in the film The Deadly Affair, which you made for Sidney Lumet. I was wondering, in a case like that, what influenced you most in deciding to take the part? Was it the track record of the director, or the quality of the script itself, adapted from the novel by John le Carré?
It was a bit of both. For one thing, I admired John le Carré's books very much indeed, and also I'd worked with Sidney Lumet a couple of times, not in film, but on television at that time. He used to be involved in some really good live television shows that were current in the States about 10 years previously. But that was an interesting film because it was a failure. I thought it was a very good film myself, and it came to me as a great surprise that it was a failure, but failure it was. And I think the reason for that was that spy film had created by that time an image of its own. That is to say, people went to see spy films because they expected to identify with the knight in shining armor who played the spy, the principal spy, who should, of course, be successful and victorious. And in this one, the poor man was quite the reverse of that. As you may recall, he was married to a nymphomaniac, and he was constantly involved in what he construed as acts of treachery, and he thought the whole nature of his game was repulsive, which presumably is what John le Carré thinks about the spy game.
What would you do if you were put in the position of, let's say, Mr. Brian Forbes, and given a studio and money and a selection of scripts and how to go about doing them that you think would be helpful or save the industry?
This may be a statement which I'm not entitled to make, but I think that probably Brian Forbes' program is not the kind of program that will appeal very strongly to the big markets in England. And I think it's sensible to think of the markets of England which are primarily above the Wash, north of the Wash, as we used to say. Now, north of the Wash, it's been established since the year dot that north of the Wash we like rather strong comedies and strong stories. I come from Huddersfield, did you know that? And just outside Huddersfield is a place called Holme Firth, and in Holme Firth they have a plant which manufactures Bamforth postcards. Those are the postcards that you used to buy, and I hope you still do, on the front at Brighton and Southend and places like that. You know, these ladies with fat bottoms and the sort of rather coarse jokes. They still go on making those, I'm glad to say, and the quality is just as high as ever. And I would like to think that the quality in making the movie equivalent was as high as ever, but the last Carry-On picture that I saw, although there were some good jokes in it, was not on the whole a good film. The story was rotten, really bad. And it seems to me that there's no reason why we shouldn't make lots more Carry-On pictures, but better. There's an analogy there. When I read in the papers that Mr. Ken Tynan was going to present us with what he described as elegant erotica, I thought, yes, the boy has something there, because I've often been to strip joints and places like that, and burlesques and so on, and I've thought, oh boy, what wouldn't I give to produce one of these shows? You know, we could make it really good. Better dialogue, better jokes, and the whole thing much more erotic and this, I thought, was what Ken was going to do. So I went to see his show in New York, and I thought it was rotten. Jokes were no good, no baggy pants comedians. Anyhow, what I'm in a long way trying to say is that I don't see why we shouldn't make some very good comedies with good writers preparing the scripts. I don't know who it is that Darling Betty Box employs as writers, but they sure aren't as good as they might be. And I really would truly like to see some... example. I live in Switzerland, traveler's tale. I live in Switzerland, and consequently most of the films I see are French. And the French have a very healthy industry, as opposed to us. And they, just as the Americans have their westerns to lean back upon, the French have their policiers, the neat, nifty little French police stories, which are always terribly well done, very chic and very well thought out. And all the good actors have a chance to act in them, like the dignified people like Gabin and Belmondo and Alain Delon and Jacques Brel and the whole lot. And so I don't see why we shouldn't have something like that going for us. And if we want to do something a little bit more intellectual than that, if we want, in fact, to put our equivalent of Jean-Luc Godard into the field, then there's nothing to stop us doing so, because as long as we make them for the same sort of budget that Godard makes his films for, we could afford to do it.
Is there anything you'd like to be remembered for in particular, Mr. Mason, either as a man or as an actor?
Well, I know what I don't want to be remembered for, and I know sure as hell what I'll be remembered for. It'll be something darn stupid. And for instance, when they write my obituary, I was very much touched when they wrote an obituary of Franchot Tone. And they had to refer to some ridiculous and absurd and rather sordid incident involving Barbara Payton, was it, or something? Well, they just couldn't get over it, you see. So that I know that when they write my obituary, they'll say something like how I used to make fun of Mr. Rank and how I liked cats, or how they'll pick up some sordid incident, you know, and that'll be it. And I'd much rather be regarded as just a serviceable actor of the day, and let it go at that, cutting out all the trimmings.
James Mason, thank you very much.